Chris and Mendi Tackett. They are coming from Granbury, which is just southwest of Fort Worth, long drive for them. They're going to talk to you guys about Christian nationalism and the battle against it and its spread. It's privatizing and commoditizing public education and tearing it up, and we got to fight it. So they're going to tell you how you can do it, why it's a danger, describe it a little bit better for you than I did. And afterwards, they will have a Q&A session because it's a very important topic, and there's a lot of nuance to it as well. So please give it up for the Tacketts, folks.
Hi, thank you all for having us. It's a great crowd. So there's been some really good topics, and we're going to bring down the mood just a little bit with some... No. Okay, so we don't actually live in Granbury now. I have to confess, we did move to Fort Worth about a year ago. But I'll give you a little bit of our backstory, and then we'll kind of dig in a little more to the subject matter. So we are originally from Granbury, both of us, and we were born and raised there. I was born and raised there. Chris was raised there most of his life.
I can't claim it. I was born in Connecticut. So.
But at any rate, we graduated high school there. We moved back there with our kids in 2008. We were both very involved. PTA, Chris ran the local baseball and softball league, and he said one day, I think I'm going to run for school board. And I was like, yay, that's a great idea. So he did. And school board is a nonpartisan office, and so he made the rounds all around town with all the clubs and groups and whatnot, and he came home one night and he said, it was really strange that I was there, to meet everybody, and the speaker that they had, now this was back in 2014, the speaker that was there tonight talked about...
At the Hood County Republican
Club meeting.
Let's preface that.
Okay. Said it was doing the entire presentation on the importance of conservatives taking over school boards. And that was in 2014. And we both were like, that's weird. That's not how that's supposed to work. So at any rate, go along to 2015, and we had...
Can we say that I won?
Oh, yeah.
I did. I win. I served.
So we go on to 2015, and we had a challenge to some LGBTQ library books at our local library, not our school library, the county library. And so many of us in the community, we had a rock star librarian at the time, many of us in the community gathered around, we went to commissioners' meetings, and we fought back, and we ultimately won, and that was great. But something that we noticed that, again, was like, that's weird, was there were a lot, the biggest voices who were coming to advocate against banning books were pastors from some of the local churches. We're like, that's weird.
Advocating to ban books.
Yeah, advocating to ban books. We had Raphael Cruz come into town to give sermons. And I was watching some of those sermons, even though they weren't my church. I was watching them because Raphael Cruz came to town to preach at churches in our town. And he was telling people in the congregation that public schools were indoctrinating our kids. And I was like, well, people in my family are teachers, so I know that isn't true. We had the local pastor council take out ads in the newspaper advocating that only conservative Christians should run for school board, and that they should call up or contact the pastor council, and that they would help them win races. So these kinds of things were happening between about 2014 and 2018, 2019. There were lots of other things. Dave Welch came to town. He's with the U.S. Pastor Council. He was trying to talk the Chamber of Commerce and supporting the bathroom bill, and we just had all kinds of weird things happening. So Chris and I started digging. I started digging into the what, which we figured out was Christian nationalism, and Chris started digging into the money. So I'll be quiet and I'll let him start talking for a minute.
So the money is what really started to push us into understanding how these things were all connected. It became one at that Hood County Republican Club where the guy spoke and said, hey, take over school boards. The guy who was about to run and be elected to be our Texas House rep was also there, and local guy, and when I was on the school board, we talked to him and he told us he was going to support public education when he got down to Austin. And when we started sending him, hey, here's the bills to support, here's the amendments that, you know, you should really be paying attention to and yay or nay to support public education, he voted against it every single time. Every single thing that we said, please vote for or against, he was exactly the opposite. And so he's telling us he's pro-public education, but at the same time, he's doing things that are exactly the opposite of what the public education community is asking for. And I started trying to figure out why. So I went to the Texas Ethics Commission website, started pulling every single campaign finance report I could, and realized, that he had received about 75% of his money, which was several $100,000, from just 3 sources. And I started looking at those 3 sources, and it was a gentleman named Ferris Wilkes, who lives in Cisco, Texas, a gentleman named Tim Dunn, who lives in Midland, and this organization called Empower Texans. And I didn't know who they were at the time, right? So then you start digging and you look at Empower Texans, because they were showing up in a couple of places, and you realize that it was Wilkes and Dunn funding Empower Texans. So now I know 75% of this guy's money is coming from really the same source. And so it doesn't matter what the constituents of this person actually want, it's what those handful of people tell them to do, right? That's the reality of what we started to see. And I, of course, posted it on Facebook because I was like, oh my gosh, look what I found. And people all over the state started saying, would you do the same thing for my rep? Because I think they're problematic. And what we figured out was it was an entire network of money and political action committees that all had names of things like, you know, that maybe might sound innocuous. And they were, of course, sending like mailers like crazy to everybody's home during an election season.
And there were also handouts in the churches on Sundays saying
voter guides.
Yeah, voter guides saying, we're not telling you exactly who to vote for, but this person is for this and this person is for that, so you make your own decision.
So the reality is, pulling all the money helped us understand there was a network.
Wilkes and Dunn, are they in a particular industry?
They are.
Well, I will tell you, Mr. Wilkes and his brother Dan had a fracking company. They sold to a company in Singapore, and they made $3.5 billion on it, which is a lot of money, And then Tim Dunn is oil and gas, right? Neither is education. Absolutely not. But they have tried to put their thumb into a whole lot of things around the state. And their ideology, what we figured out, once we started putting name to everything, started reading books by, like, Taking America Back for God by Andrew Whitehead and Sam Perry. Tremendous book that starts to identify what Christian nationalism is and what people believe. The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel is another fabulous book, because people who subscribe to this Christian nationalist ideology will tell you that America was founded as a Christian nation, and it should be in all things carrying forward in our laws. They should be preferenced in our society. That the founders, when they talked about freedom of religion, it was, well, we really mean Christianity, and we know there's different versions, right? There's maybe different denominations, but we're Christian, right? And so those were the things that started to give us the language to understand what we had seen happening in our communities.
Yeah, and I want to throw in a little asterisk real quick, the disclaimer, because it's really important, and y'all probably already know this, but it's really important that we say every time, Christian nationalism does not represent every Christian. It does not represent every church. And it is a political ideology that has been married to a religious outlook. And I just think it's really important that we always tell people it's not representative of your church. We're not saying that. We're just saying it's
But that's the thing, right? It is an ideology that has married an expression of Christianity, which again, there's lots of different expressions of Christianity, with this desire for political power. And the power and the ability to impose their beliefs on everybody and for their religious interpretation to be privileged over everybody else's is what drives it, right? So when you start to think about the things that we had seen in our communities, and I'm sure as we described some of the things we had seen in our community, you've seen it in yours, right? The attempt to take over public school boards and having to fight tooth and nail to get sane, rational people elected. The push to take over, again, city councils, county commissioner seats, Texas State House, Texas senators, statewide elected office. They're influencing every single bit of that. If you haven't seen the documentary Deep in the Pockets of Texas, I highly recommend looking for it. If you search for it, you'll end up landing on my YouTube page, which has the full, it's got the full video there you can watch. Mendi and I had the opportunity to participate in the making of that documentary. It does a great job touching the tip of the iceberg of what it is. Once you watch that, now you're ready to start diving into the rest of it.
But the important thing that we're here to focus on today out of Christian nationalism is the impact that these people want to have on public education. And you all know, you all seen in your community and in other communities across the state that getting into breaking public ed, for one, is what they intend to do. We see book bans, we've seen transgender athlete bills, we've seen bathroom bills, we've seen In God We Trust in public schools. We've seen the 10 Commandments was an attempt just this last session. We've seen HB 900, which is the book bans. What else?
Chaplains in public schools replacing school counselors.
That's right. So they fully intend to, number one, break public confidence in public ed, right? Because most people do support their public school, right? If their kid is going to public school, they're like, I like my teacher. I like the coaches. I like our band program. I like our public school. But the more and more these folks can manufacture problems and make the public think that public schools aren't functioning well and refuse to fund them fully, that is easier to sell a voucher and a charter program. School choice, ESAs, any of the myriad of definitions, they come up with for it. So go ahead.
I got a hand.
Oh, yes.
Help me out with this vouchers on your T-shirt.
I was just about to go there. Okay, so we have been fighting for public education for a number of years. And the push for vouchers, vouchers wasn't really anything anybody talked about until 1954. 1954 is Brown v. Board of Education, right? Desegregating schools. That was the moment vouchers entered the popular lexicon. You saw Milton Friedman, who was one of those economists, right? Who was advocating for, we should just allow parents to take the money and go to these private schools. And if they want to be segregated, we should be okay with that because it's the parents' choice. And we should be giving them vouchers because we really don't want government schools, and that's the term they use, right, as they're talking about public schools. We don't want the government dictating what our children will learn or who they're going to learn with. Okay? So that's the vouchers, their choice, school choice, since 1954. Now, what drives vouchers? What is the impetus that makes it run forward today? It is greed. It's money that makes it go. It is religion. And it is racism. Right? Those are the three. It's not to say that everybody who might choose to go to a private school or choose to go to a charter school, right, and make those choices as a personal for the family and their kid. It is what it is, right? People have been making those choices for generations. But the people who push things like the vouchers, right, who push school choice and education savings accounts, there is a motive behind it. It's greed, it's religion, it's racism, right? Those are the things. And again, different groups will have different elements that is their focus, but that's what drives it. If you look in 2011, 2020 at this point, right, is the TPPF letter. The Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is this ultra right-wing think tank based in Austin that has Tim Dunn, who serves as their vice chairman and has been for a decade plus. Their CEO at the time, Kevin Roberts, who has now left and heads up the Heritage Foundation, which is another scary organization, he sent out a letter to basically fundraise in 2020 that spelled out exactly what the plan was going to be for this next legislative session. I guess it was actually November 21, right? Because it was getting ready for the next session. But it spelled out the fact that vouchers were going to be the push, that the schools were Marxist cesspools of indoctrination, you know, the LGBTQ agenda run amok, and that they had to take out anybody who was the rhinos or other legislators who were going to stop them from running roughshod over the public education system. Because their goal is to break the system.
And we've recently said, this lady over here brought it up a while ago, we've recently, like within the last week, seen Julie Pickering, who's a State Board of Education member, put out the video with the PragerU lady, her name escapes me, you know, saying that the state of Texas is partnering with PragerU to develop curriculum, which PragerU is in Florida at this point. Now, the thing that you need to know about PragerU is that it got a huge amount of seed money from guess who?
Ferris Wilks.
Right? And I'm going to let Chris go into a little bit more in depth on that, and I know that we kind of need to wrap up so that y'all can do other things that you need to do. But to say that Julie Pickering is totally off the mark, I don't think is entirely true. So go ahead.
So the thing you need to understand with why this PragerU thing is coming up generally is the House, well, the Texas legislature passed House Bill 1605 in this last session, which allowed the Texas Education Agency to create core curriculum that could be leveraged by any district that wanted to across the state, right? It was expanding the pool that districts could choose. So this idea that PragerU would be coming in under 1605 and creating curriculum is absolutely not out to lunch. Now, what PragerU has done is the Texas comptroller, who controls all of the accounting, right, for the state, if somebody's going to get paid, they have to put them into their system, right? They have to create them as a vendor, not that they've been chosen to provide anything, but they have to be set up as a vendor. So what the comptroller has said is we set Prager up as a vendor. But nothing has gone through SBOE to approve, the State Board of Education to approve yet, and nothing has come through TEA yet.
But they're telling you what they want to do. They're telling us all what they want to do. So keep that in mind. Don't brush it off. I mean,
and you have to understand that the State Board of Education is not this sexy office, right? Nobody really pays attention to SBOE, but the Defend Texas Liberty PAC and a few other Texas oligarchs dropped, and Defend Texas Liberty PAC is Wilkes and Dunn. That's where they went after Empower Texans. They dumped a ton of money into SBOE races so that they could remove some of those folks they didn't really want on the State Board of Education and get those who are more open to choice and charters and things like these vendors. So what Julie Pickering did by doing this with Prager is absolutely gaslighting, but it's to put pressure on everybody else to make this happen. So you have to understand, Mendi said it, they are telegraphing where they are going. And if the SBOE moved further right on the last go-round, the likelihood of them approving somebody like Prager, which is, Prager University is not really a university. It is a YouTube channel, right? They have a website with a bunch of YouTube videos that are designed to be right-wing propaganda targeted at young people. That is the agenda with PragerU. And Mendi said, Ferris Wilks gave them the seed money to get going.
Isn't that indoctrinating?
Now, and who else Ferris Wilks gave seed money to and still owns, who partners all the time with PragerU carrying things forward, is the Daily Wire, which is run by Ben Shapiro. That is Ferris Wilks as well. So when you think about all of these things connecting and all these crazy things that are going on in the world, realize there is a network of money and ideology that is working to take advantage of and tear down the public education system. Again, because they stand to make a lot of money, they'll get the opportunity to indoctrinate, do the things they accuse public schools of, they absolutely want to do, and it will drive segregation back into schools, right? That's where we're going.
So to kind of wrap up, we could talk about this literally for like hours on end, but we need to wrap it up for you guys. But the thing that we want to leave you with today, because it does feel a little bit hopeless sometimes, and I do want to say they are a very loud minority. They are not the majority. But it has taken they have a very well-funded network, and they have been working at this for literally decades. And we didn't know it. And so the thing that we have to do, now that we are seeing it, is we have to get loud, and we have to talk about it, and we have to call it out. We have to
see it, name it, fight it. You gotta know what you're looking at. You got to know what to call it, and now you can go fight against it, and you can get others involved with you, because you don't want one voice. You need lots of voices to push back.
And Chris has a website besides his campaign finance, which you can find any of the campaign finance stuff that you want for state level races, PACs, whatever. It's all free. It's for you to use. Clip, copy, share, paste, whatever you want to do with it. It's there, and it's free for all of you to use.
ChrisTackettNow.com.
And then he also has seeitnameit.fightit.com.
Yes.
And there's a lot of resources that we have read through and learned from the experts that we started digging into, who have been studying this for a long, long time. Those resources are also on the seeitnameit.fightit.com website. And we urge all of you to read, look at articles, talk about it, be aware when things are happening in your schools, in your community. Go to school board meetings, not to go hassle school board people, but do go look, at what's going on. They are, sending people in to hassle school board people. And we also need to be there to speak up for our community schools and say, that's just not going to fly here. We're not going to do that.
And then every chance you get, you got to vote, right? I mean, that makes all the difference in the world, is showing up.
I'm with Texas Alliance of Retired Americans, who are mostly teachers, retired teachers. And what's even scarier about this is that, since we buy a lot of textbooks, a lot of the textbooks that are available around the nation were bought through Texas.
Right.
Because the state, as Texas sets the agenda for what's going to go in textbooks, because we're such a large market, you will see those same books get sold all across the country.
Yeah. Yes, Jan.
When you say see it, name it, fight it, is the name Christian nationalism? What are we naming?
It really is. It is Christian nationalism. And it's really, the dangerous stuff is really white Christian nationalism.
I mean, it's an uncomfortable thing, it's been so uncomfortable for us. I mean, we'll be the first to tell you, when we first started talking about it, it's hard, y'all. It's hard because there's people who bristle and you've known them for years and they're like, we can't believe you'd be talking about this or talking about our church or whatever. But you still have to get real about what is happening and talk to people about it, because that's the only way that we start making change.
And that's why I wear a shirt that just puts it right out there.
Yeah.
Are you finding that Dominion theology is a root with this, and Bill Bright and Campus Crusade?
Oh my goodness, you went there. Yes, yes. It is absolutely a part of it. She asked if Dominion theology is, and Bill Bright and Campus Crusade and those things are a part of this. Absolutely.
And I'll tell you too that right before the 2016 election, one of the other ding 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 red flags for us is that the largest church in our community down in Granbury did a whole sermon on Seven Mountains Dominionism, and we were like, holy cow. So
yeah.
yes,
and that's where we could talk for hours.
From what I've read and seen, that is where the biggest, I hesitate to say root, but that's where it was taking root. He planted it in the college campuses through the Christian Campus Crusade for Christ or whatever.
And public education is one of the mountains. It's one of the 7 areas that they feel like they should. Okay, we've got a couple more here.
Is that a waste of time, or is that something?
Well, look, it is not fait accompli that PragerU is going to be voted on by the SBOE. Telling the SBOE you don't want it absolutely lets them know there are voices saying we shouldn't have it, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying don't, but the likelihood based on the people who were elected this last time and the current makeup, and maybe it's not we throw the door open for them, but if they get their foot in, they'll continue to go forward. And that's really, as we think about this voucher special session that's coming, right? Creighton has already said, well, maybe we won't get everything, but we'll get our first step in, and then we'll build from there, right? So they just want the door opened.
But again, that's why it's important, whether it's SBOE or it's your state legislators, senators, you need to be contacting them and get loud. Get loud. They need to hear your opposition. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I know that they're coming in through the school boards, and I know that they're coming in through the students. What wolf in sheep's clothing is coming in at the teachers? What is the organization that's coming in for the teachers to engage the teachers? Because those are the soldiers for their effort, ultimately.
You know, I can't say that I've specifically seen anything going after teachers, but I will say I think that this chaplain in the school business, that's going to be one of the biggest things that, right, and if you have somebody in the school who is sympathetic to it or whatever, which, again, I'm not, but it does happen, you know, everybody, there's a myriad of thoughts and beliefs no matter where you go. But I think this chaplain instead of counselors is going to be one of the big, that's the worry that we have.
There's no accountability because the students have been defamed. They've been, at least in the city of Allen, they've had their cell phones taken from them. They're not allowed to bring their cell phones out. So bad behavior, bad acting, which is what we rely on as a society with our cell phones to capture police misbehavior, capture municipal misbehavior. All these signals that they emanate and we capture, you can't do that in the school anymore because the students are.
Yeah. Well, I think that is something to pay particular attention to. Yes, ma'am.
Last question.
Yeah. Oh, okay. 2 more. You've been waiting. Can we do 2? Okay. Please, you've been waiting.
So I have a couple of things. I'm Kathy Sweeney. I'm a pastor of Arapahoe United Methodist Church. We have several representatives here. So I want to ask a question. Given that the special session related to vouchers is planned for October, very specifically, when teachers are going to be working and there's less likelihood that they will storm the building. So what is your suggestion for finding out where we can, in mass, instead of just one person, move towards Austin and protest this?
There is a rally being planned for October 7th. October 7th, which is a Saturday.
Texans for Public Education, Pastors for Texas Children. Dinah, is Texas Parent Pack going to be part of that or no? Okay.
To be determined, okay.
But there's several organizations that have partnered to put on that rally. That'll be October 7th. I don't know what time it is,
yeah. But watch some of the social media because it will be out there.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I've talked with 2 of the Richardson School Board trustees, and Richardson will not be doing chaplains.
Well, and that's great. And that's another thing is encourage your school board to vote. No, we're not going to do it.
Because every school board is going to have to vote up or down. Right. It's not like they can just let it lie. The way they wrote the legislation, you have to either approve it or turn it down. Yeah. So it's going to put everybody on the hot seat.
Okay, this lady right here.
Christian nationalism. Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro are Jewish. How do you square that circle?
That is a really bigger conversation than we can have right here. But the thing you need to know is that anybody under the sun, no matter what, there's atheists who
extremism is what
it is because it's a political ideology married with a religious type outlook on it. So just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you can't fall into the category of supporting Christian nationalist ideology, right? Because it's power and it's favoritism, right?
In our history in this country, the Ku Klux Klan started in the churches. Right.
Yeah.
They went into the churches and brought their money and developed their ideology, and that's how we have the racism that we have today.
So y'all, we got to stop so that these fine people can get their store back and y'all can finish up your meeting. If you have other questions, you're welcome to find us afterwards, and we really appreciate the fact that you invited us to come talk today. And